For decades, the Crimson Moon Carnival had been a beacon of joy and excitement, traveling from town to town across the American Midwest. Among its colorful cast of performers, none was more beloved or more reviled than Giggles the Clown. To the children, he was a figure of mirth and wonder, his antics bringing peals of laughter that echoed through the carnival grounds. But to many adults, especially the rowdier, crueler patrons who visited the carnival's beer tents, Giggles was a target for their drunken mockery and abuse. Behind the painted smile and red nose, behind the character of Giggles, was a man named Marcus Elwood. Once, he had been an up-and-coming actor with dreams of Broadway stardom. But a series of personal tragedies and professional setbacks had led him to the carnival, where he found a kind of solace in bringing joy to others. At least, that's how it had started. Year after year, Marcus endured the taunts and ridicule. "Hey, clown, why the long face?" they'd jeer, oblivious to the pain in his eyes. "Dance for us, you painted freak." They'd throw beer cans, lit cigarettes, whatever was at hand. The carnival management turned a blind eye. After all, the rowdy patrons spent money, and that was what mattered. Each night, as Marcus removed his makeup, he felt a piece of himself slip away. The line between Giggles and Marcus began to blur. Where did the clown end and the man begin? In the grimy mirror of his trailer, he sometimes caught glimpses of a stranger staring back at him, a being with Giggles' painted features, but eyes that burned with a cold, terrible fury. It was on a sweltering August night in the small town of Redemption, Illinois, that something in Marcus finally snapped. The carnival had been in town for a week, and the local troublemakers had made Giggles their favorite target. As Marcus prepared for the evening's performance, he felt a strange calm settle over him. He looked in the mirror and saw Giggles staring back, but the clown's usual grin had been replaced by a rictus of malice. "Tonight," Marcus whispered to his reflection, "we give them a show they'll never forget." The sun set, and the carnival came alive with lights and music. Families streamed through the gates, children dragging their parents from ride to ride. But Marcus had eyes only for the group of young men stumbling out of the beer tent, their faces flushed with alcohol and cruelty. "Hey, look, it's the crybaby clown," one of them shouted, pointing at Marcus. The others laughed, already moving to surround him. But this time, Marcus didn't cower or try to slip away. Instead, he turned to them with a smile that made their laughter die in their throats. "Why so serious, boys?" Marcus asked, his voice a raspy whisper that seemed to slither into their ears. "Don't you want to come and play? I've got a special show, just for you." Before they could respond, Marcus was moving, dancing between them with an inhuman grace. His white-gloved hands flicked out, too fast to see, leaving trails of glittering dust in the air. The men coughed and sputtered, their eyes growing wide and unfocused. "Follow me," Marcus crooned, "to a world of pure imagination." Like rats following the Pied Piper, the men trailed after Marcus as he led them to the funhouse. The garish clown face that served as its entrance seemed to leer at them, its mouth gaping wide to swallow them whole. Inside, Marcus moved swiftly, activating hidden switches and levers that he had installed over the past week. The fun house had always been his domain, and now it would become his instrument of revenge. The first man stumbled into a room of mirrors, disoriented by the countless reflections of himself. Suddenly, the floor beneath him gave way, dropping him into a pit filled with a bubbling, caustic liquid. His screams echoed through the fun house, but to those outside, it sounded like nothing more than the delighted shrieks of carnival goers. Another found himself in a narrow corridor where the walls began to close in. Razor-sharp blades emerged from the padding, slicing into him as the space grew tighter and tighter. His blood painted abstract patterns on the walls, a grisly artwork that would be discovered only much later. A third man wandered into a room that seemed to spin, the floor tilting at impossible angles. As he stumbled and fell, he rolled into a hidden trapdoor that dumped him into a pit filled with sharpened stakes. The fall wasn't long enough to kill him instantly, leaving him to suffer as life slowly bled out of him. The remaining men met similarly gruesome fates, each one carefully crafted by Marcus to inflict maximum terror and pain. As the last of them fell, Marcus stood in the control room of the funhouse, watching through hidden cameras as his tormentors breathed their last. But the night was young, and Marcus' newfound bloodlust was far from sated. He slipped out of the funhouse and back into the carnival proper, his painted smile now a terrifying leer. Children who had once laughed at his antics now shrank back in fear, sensing the wrongness that emanated from the clown. Throughout the night, Marcus lured more victims into his deadly funhouse. Some were other tormentors from his past, others simply unlucky souls who crossed his path. With each death, Marcus felt a surge of dark ecstasy, as if each life taken filled a void within him that he hadn't known existed. It wasn't until dawn broke that the true horror of the night's events was discovered. As the first carnival workers arrived to begin the day's preparations, they found the funhouse transformed into a charnel house. The stench of blood and death hung heavy in the air, and the once cheerful attractions were now instruments of torture and murder. But of Marcus, of Giggles, there was no sign. In the chaos and panic that followed the discovery, he had simply vanished, leaving behind only a painted message on the funhouse wall. The show must go on. In the years that followed, stories began to circulate among carnival workers and patrons alike. Tales of a phantom clown who appeared at carnivals across the country, leaving a trail of blood and terror in his wake. Some said he could be summoned by saying Giggles 3 times in front of a carnival mirror. Others claimed he appeared to those who had bullied or abused others, exacting a terrible revenge. Funhouses fell out of favor, seen as too dangerous, too likely to hide deadly secrets. Clowns, once beloved figures of fun, became objects of fear and suspicion. The Crimson Moon Carnival itself shut down, unable to escape the shadow of the massacre that had occurred on its grounds. But somewhere out there, Marcus, or the thing that had once been Marcus, continues his dark crusade. Those unlucky enough to encounter him are never seen again, though sometimes their laughter can be heard echoing from abandoned fun houses and derelict carnival grounds. It's a chilling sound, a duet of madness between Giggles' deranged cackle and the dying mirth of his victims. And so, the legend of Giggles the Clown lives on, a cautionary tale whispered around campfires and at sleepovers. A reminder that behind every painted smile might lurk unimaginable darkness, and that the line between comedy and horror is far thinner than we'd like to believe. For in the end, as Marcus had discovered on that fateful night, the real joke is on us all, and Giggles, with his blood stained. The Ethereal Nights Carnival had been a fixture of the American landscape for over a century, its origins shrouded in mystery and whispered legends. Among its many attractions, none was more iconic or beloved than the towering Ferris wheel known as the Cosmic Voyager. Its rusted frame creaked ominously as it turned, ancient carriages swaying in the night breeze, promising riders a view of the stars they'd never forget. What few realized was that the Cosmic Voyager offered far more than just a scenic ride. It was a gateway, a portal to realms beyond human comprehension, and it hungered for more than just the price of admission. Dr. Elena Vasquez, professor of theoretical physics at Miskatonic University, had been tracking the Ethereal Nights Carnival for years. She'd noticed patterns in disappearances, strange atmospheric phenomena, and reports of time distortions that all seemed to center around the carnival's appearances. But it wasn't until the carnival set up on the outskirts of Arkham, Massachusetts, that she finally had a chance to investigate in person. On a crisp October evening, Elena made her way through the carnival grounds, her scientific skepticism warring with a growing sense of unease. The air seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly energy, and she could have sworn the shadows moved when she wasn't looking directly at them. As she approached the Cosmic Voyager, Elena's unease grew. The Ferris wheel towered above her, its metal frame etched with strange symbols that seemed to writhe and change when she tried to focus on them. The carriages, painted in faded colors that might once have been cheerful, now looked like cages suspended in the air. "Care for a ride, miss?" a gravelly voice asked. Elena turned to see an old carny, his face deeply lined and his eyes clouded with cataracts. "The view from the top is out of this world." He chuckled at his own joke, but the sound held no mirth. The metal was cold to the touch, and she could feel vibrations running through it, almost like a pulse. As the wheel began to turn, Elena took out her equipment, an EMF meter, a Geiger counter, and other specialized devices she'd brought to measure any anomalies. But as her carriage neared the top of the wheel's rotation, all of her instruments went haywire. The EMF meter's needle swung wildly, the Geiger counter emitted a high-pitched squeal, and her phone's screen filled with static. It was then that Elena noticed the change in her surroundings. The carnival below had vanished, replaced by a swirling vortex of cosmic energy. Stars and nebulae wheeled past, their colors shifting in ways that hurt her eyes to look at. She felt a sense of vertigo so profound that she gripped the sides of the carriage, her knuckles white. "Beautiful, isn't it?" a voice said, and Elena realized with a start that she was no longer alone in the carriage. Sitting across from her was a figure that seemed to be made of living shadow, its edges blurring and reforming constantly. Where its face should have been, there was only a swirling mass of stars. What are you?" Elena managed to ask, her scientific mind struggling to process what she was seeing. The figure's laugh was the sound of solar winds and collapsing stars. "We are the Cosmic Voyager, or rather, we are what powers it. We are the hunger that spans galaxies, the void between worlds. And you, Elena Vasquez, are our latest meal." Tentacles of eldritch energy wrapped around the carriage, pulling it further into the cosmic abyss. Elena tried to scream, but found that sound didn't travel in this impossible space. She watched in horror as reality warped around her, the laws of physics she had spent her life studying crumbling like sand. She felt her body begin to change, to merge with the metal of the carriage. Her flesh became cold steel, her blood the grease that lubricated ancient gears. Her mind expanded, touching alien consciousnesses that drove her to the brink of madness. In that moment of transformation, Elena understood the true nature of the Cosmic Voyager. It was a trap, a lure created by entities from beyond the stars to feed on the life energy of unsuspecting humans. Each rider absorbed by the wheel became a part of it, their consciousness trapped for eternity, experiencing endless cosmic horror. As the last vestiges of her humanity slipped away, Elena saw flashes of the wheel's history. She saw ancient cultures constructing similar devices, offering sacrifices to appease hungry gods. She saw the ethereal night's carnival forming around the wheel, its other attractions mere window dressing to draw in potential victims. And she saw the future, countless more victims drawn into the wheel's embrace, feeding the insatiable hunger of the entities that controlled it. With a sudden lurch, Elena found herself back in the carnival, the carriage touching down on solid ground. But she knew she wasn't the same person who had boarded the ride. Her body felt wrong, as if her skin didn't quite fit anymore. And in her mind, she could hear the whispers of the cosmic entities, promising her wonders and horrors beyond imagination if she would only help them feed. As she stumbled away from the Cosmic Voyager, Elena saw 5 teenagers approaching the ride, laughing and pushing each other playfully. She opened her mouth to warn them, to tell them to run, but what came out was, enjoy the ride. The view from the top is out of this world. She watched helplessly as they boarded the carriage, her new cosmic awareness allowing her to see the tendrils of energy already wrapping around them. As the wheel began to turn, Elena felt a surge of alien hunger, knowing that soon, 5 more consciousnesses would join the eternal torment of the cosmic voyager. Dawn broke over the carnival grounds. The first rays of sunlight, seeming pale and insignificant compared to the cosmic vistas Elena had witnessed. The Ferris wheel stood motionless, its carriages gently swaying in the morning breeze. To casual observers, it looked like any other carnival ride. But Elena knew better. She could see the faces pressed against the metal of the carriages, silently screaming for an eternity that would never end. And she knew that her own face was among them, a part of her forever trapped in that moment of cosmic revelation and terror. The ethereal night's carnival packed up and moved on, as it had done countless times before. But now it had a new barker, a woman with haunted eyes and a voice that seemed to echo from vast, empty spaces. Elena traveled with the carnival, her human form a mere shell housing a consciousness that spanned galaxies. Some said her eyes glowed with an unearthly light, while others claimed they could see stars moving in their depths. And so the cosmic voyager continued its journey, moving from town to town, always seeking new victims to feed its insatiable cosmic hunger. Those who rode it were forever changed, their minds touched by vistas no human was meant to see, their bodies transformed into vessels for entities beyond comprehension. For the hunger of the Ferris wheel was eternal, spanning time and space, dimensions and realities. And as long as there were curious humans willing to take a chance on a simple carnival ride, that hunger would never be sated. In university lecture halls, physics students still speak in hushed tones about Dr. Elena Vasquez, the brilliant professor who vanished without a trace. Her theories on interdimensional travel and cosmic energy are studied and debated, but none realize how close she came to the truth, or the price she paid for that knowledge. And on quiet nights, in towns where the ethereal night's carnival has passed through, some claim they can hear the creaking of metal and the whisper of alien voices on the wind. A sound that never fails to send shivers down the spine and make one question the nature of reality itself. For the cosmic voyager is always turning, always hungry, always waiting for the next unsuspecting rider to step into its cosmic embrace. And in the vast, uncaring universe, it is but one of many such entities, patiently waiting for humanity to reach just a little too far into the unknown. The Starlight Carnival had been traveling the country for decades, leaving a trail of wonder and whispered secrets in its wake. Among its many attractions, none was more sought after or more feared than the tent of Madame Zara, the fortune teller. Her predictions were uncannily accurate, her insights so profound that many believed she truly could peer beyond the veil of time. What none knew was the dark bargain Madame Zara had struck for her gift, or the terrible price she paid with each revelation. On a crisp autumn evening, as the carnival prepared for its last night in the small town of Millhaven, 17-year-old Jake Foster found himself drawn to the mystery of Madame Zara's tent. He'd spent the past week working up the courage to visit her, half excited and half terrified of what she might reveal about his future. The tent stood apart from the others, its deep purple fabric adorned with silver stars that seemed to twinkle of their own accord. A sign in flowing script promised futures revealed, destinies unveiled. As Jake approached, he felt a chill run down his spine, as if crossing an invisible threshold into another world. He pushed aside the heavy curtain and stepped inside. The interior was dimly lit by candles that cast dancing shadows on the walls. The air was thick with the scent of incense, and Jake could hear the faint tinkling of unseen wind chimes. At the center of the tent sat Madame Zura, her ageless face partially obscured by a beaded veil. "I've been expecting you, Jake Foster," she said, her voice low and melodious. Jake startled, realizing he hadn't told her his name. "How did you?" he began, but Madame Zara raised a bejeweled hand to silence him. "I know many things, child. Things that were, things that are, and some things that have not yet come to pass." She gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit. Let us see what the fates have in store for you." Jake lowered himself into the chair, his heart pounding. On the table between them sat a large crystal ball, its surface swirling with mist. Madame Zara placed her hands on either side of the crystal, closing her eyes in concentration. I see a crossroads in your future, Jake. A choice that will shape not only your destiny, but the destinies of many others." As she spoke, images began to form in the crystal ball. Jake leaned forward, mesmerized. He saw flashes of himself, older, standing before a crowd. He saw triumphs and failures, love and loss. But suddenly, the images in the crystal ball changed. The mist within turned dark, almost black. Madame Zara's eyes flew open, filled with a terror Jake had never seen before. "No," she whispered. "This cannot be." "What is it?" Jake asked, his voice trembling. "What do you see?" Madame Zura's gaze was fixed on the crystal ball, her face pale. I see my own death." The words had barely left her lips when the crystal ball shattered with a deafening crack. Jake threw up his arms to shield himself from the flying shards. But when he lowered them, he was confronted with a sight that would haunt him for the rest of his days. Madame Zara was aging before his eyes. Her skin wrinkled and sagged, her hair whitened and fell out in clumps. Her body seemed to shrivel, the life force draining out of her in a matter of seconds. In less than a minute, the vibrant woman who had sat across from him was reduced to a desiccated corpse. Her empty eye sockets staring accusingly at Jake. Panic overtook him. He stumbled out of the tent, gasping for air, trying to make sense of what he had just witnessed. But as he emerged into the carnival proper, he realized that his nightmare was far from over. Every reflective surface in the carnival, mirrors, metal poles, even the glossy paint of the rides, showed Jake's reflection. But it wasn't the 17-year-old boy he knew. Instead, he saw himself as an old man, his face lined with age, his hair gray and thinning. With dawning horror, Jake understood what had happened. Madame Zara's gift or curse had transferred to him in her final moments. He now bore the terrible burden of foresight, along with its devastating consequences. In the days that followed, Jake discovered the full extent of his newfound abilities. He could see snippets of the future, flashes of what was to come. But with each prediction, he felt a piece of his own life force drain away. He watched helplessly as those around him aged and died while he remained frozen in time, eternally 17 in body, but ancient in spirit. Driven by a mix of guilt, fear, and a desperate hope that he might find a way to break the curse, Jake began to follow the carnival's route. He took up residence in Madame Zura's old tent, assuming her role as the fortune teller. Year after year, decade after decade, Jake traveled with the Starlight Carnival. He watched as the world changed around him, as horse-drawn carriages gave way to automobiles, as electricity replaced gas lamps, as the digital age dawned. Through it all, he remained unchanged, a living anachronism trapped in an ageless hell. Those who visited Jake's tent found themselves unsettled by the youthful fortune teller with ancient eyes. His predictions were always accurate, but those who received them often left with a sense of unease, as if they had brushed against something not meant for mortal understanding. Jake learned to be careful with his gift, to couch his predictions in vague terms to avoid the kind of shock that had killed Madame Zara. But the burden of knowing weighed heavily upon him. He saw wars before they happened, disasters yet to unfold, the rise and fall of nations. And always he saw death. As the years turned to decades and the decades to centuries, Jake began to understand the true nature of his curse. He was a witness to history, doomed to observe but never participate, to know the future but never change it. The carnival became his prison, the fortune teller's tent his cell. There were times when Jake considered ending it all, of finding a way to break the cycle. But the curse that kept him young also made him virtually indestructible. And deep down, a part of him feared what might happen if he died. Would the curse find a new host? Would he be dooming another innocent to this eternal torment? And so Jake continues his endless journey, moving from town to town with the Starlight Carnival. Those with keen eyes might notice that the youthful fortune teller never seems to age, that he appears in carnival photographs dating back decades. But such observations are quickly forgotten in the whirlwind of lights, noise, and excitement that is the carnival. For Jake, each new town brings a familiar routine. He sits in his tent, gazing into the crystal ball that reformed itself after Madame Zura's death. He sees the futures of those who come to him, feels the weight of knowledge that no mortal should possess. And with each prediction, he feels himself age inside, his soul growing older while his body remains forever young. The Starlight Carnival continues its eternal tour, and with it travels Jake, the reluctant seer, the youth with ancient eyes. He is a living cautionary tale about the price of knowledge and the burden of seeing beyond the veil. The Millbrook Annual Carnival had been a staple of the small town for over a century. Every year, as autumn leaves began to fall and a chill crept into the air, the carnival would roll into town, bringing with it the promise of thrills, laughter, and cherished memories. At the heart of it all stood the antique carousel, a magnificent relic from a bygone era that had been the carnival's crown jewel for as long as anyone could remember. The carousel was a sight to behold, its intricately carved horses gleaming under the twinkling lights, their manes flowing as if caught in an eternal wind. Each steed bore a unique expression, some proud and noble, others wild and untamed. But all shared one common feature, a frozen grin that seemed to invite children to climb aboard and lose themselves in the magic of the ride. 10-year-old Emily Parker had been looking forward to the carnival all year. She'd saved her allowance for months, determined to ride every attraction at least twice. But it was the carousel that held a special place in her heart. There was something about the calliope music, the dizzying lights, and the up and down motion of the horses that made her feel like she was being transported to another world. As Emily and her parents entered the carnival grounds, the familiar sights, sounds, and smells washed over them. The air was thick with the aroma of buttered popcorn and cotton candy. Barkers called out from their game booths, enticing passersby with promises of fabulous prizes. Shrieks of delight echoed from the nearby roller coaster. But something felt different this year. Emily couldn't quite put her finger on it, but there was an undercurrent of unease that seemed to permeate the carnival. The shadows between the tents and rides seemed darker, the laughter of other children slightly off-key. Even the carnies, usually so boisterous and welcoming, seemed subdued, their smiles not quite reaching their eyes. Emily shook off the feeling, chalking it up to an overactive imagination. She tugged on her mother's sleeve, pointing excitedly at the carousel. "Can we go on that first, Mom? Please." Her mother smiled indulgently. "Of course, sweetie. Let's get in line." As they approached the carousel, Emily noticed that the line was surprisingly short. Usually, it was one of the most popular rides, with wait times of up to an hour. Tonight, there were only a handful of other children waiting their turn. The ride operator, an old man with a weathered face and milky eyes, regarded them with an unreadable expression as he took their tickets. "Enjoy the ride," he said, his voice a dry rasp. "And remember, Once it starts, there's no getting off until it's finished. Emily climbed aboard her favorite horse, a white stallion with a flowing silver mane. As she settled into the saddle, she could have sworn she felt a tremor run through the wooden animal, like a shiver. But before she could dwell on it, the calliope music started up and the carousel began to move. At first, everything seemed normal. The painted scenery blurred as they spun, the up and down motion of the horses creating that familiar, giddy sensation in Emily's stomach. But as the ride picked up speed, she began to notice that something was very, very wrong. The horse beneath her felt warm, almost feverishly so. Its wooden surface seemed to pulse and shift, as if something living were trying to break free from within. Emily looked down in horror to see that the paint was bubbling and peeling away, revealing pulsing, veined flesh underneath. She tried to scream, but the calliope music had grown deafeningly loud, drowning out all other sounds. Emily looked around frantically and saw that the other children on the ride were experiencing similar terrors. A young boy to her left was sinking into his horse, his legs seeming to meld with the saddle. A girl across from her was clawing at her mount's neck as it twisted its head around, revealing a mouthful of sharp, yellowed teeth. The carousel spun faster and faster, far quicker than should have been possible. Emily could see her parents and other adults gathered around the ride, their faces masks of horror as they realized what was happening. But try as they might, they couldn't seem to breach the invisible barrier that had formed around the carousel. Emily felt her own horse's neck beginning to twist, its painted eyes blinking to life. She looked into those eyes and saw an ancient, terrible hunger there. The horse's wooden lips peeled back, revealing a maw filled with tombstone teeth, each one inscribed with strange, eldritch symbols. As the horse's head drew closer, Emily could hear a voice in her mind, ancient, cruel, and filled with an insatiable hunger. Your youth, your life, your very essence, it seemed to say, all of it will feed us, sustain us, allow us to live again. Emily felt her strength beginning to ebb, her very life force being drawn out of her and into the now living carousel horse. Around her, the other children were experiencing the same fate. Their young bodies seemed to wither in age, the stolen life, energy, causing their mounts to become more and more lifelike. Just when Emily thought she couldn't endure another moment, that she would be consumed entirely by this hungry, ancient thing, the carousel began to slow. As it ground to a halt, Emily fell from her saddle, her body weak and trembling. The barrier around the carousel fell, and parents rushed in, scooping up their traumatized children. But to their horror, they found that their once young sons and daughters had aged decades in the span of minutes. Emily's parents recoiled as they helped her up, confronted with the visage of an old woman where their little girl had once been. As the families fled the carousel, the old ride operator watched with a sad, knowing expression. He turned to the carousel, now eerily silent, and whispered, "It is done. You've had your feast. Now sleep, and hunger no more." But even as he spoke the words, he knew they were a lie. The carousel's hunger could never be truly sated. In the days that followed, the carnival packed up and left town, taking the cursed carousel with it. The aged children of Millbrook were left to grapple with bodies that no longer matched their young minds, their youth stolen by an ancient, unknowable evil. The carousel, now hosting 12 new horses, each bearing the tortured expression of the child it had consumed, moved on to the next town. It stands ready, waiting for the next group of unsuspecting riders to climb aboard, its painted horses wearing those familiar, inviting grins. To this day, the carousel travels from town to town, leaving a wake of tragedy behind it. But on quiet nights, in the places it has been, locals swear they can hear the distant tune of calliope music on the wind, accompanied by the laughter of children, a sound that never fails to chill the blood and send shivers down the spine of all who hear it. For the carousel's hunger is eternal, and there will always be more children, more life to consume. The laughter of its victims echoes through time, a warning unheeded, as the painted horses continue their endless, hungry dance.